And we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey Charlie, the War Game Chat, our monthly show on YouTube. I'm your host, Mo from Mo's Game Table. And joining me tonight are only one of my co hosts. The other co host has decided to skip off to Austin. Kev won't be joining us tonight, but everybody's favorite Gimp with the Limp, Gimpy Gamer, Nate Rogers. How's it going, Nate?
No, the glorious day in the core, man.
There we go. We have a very special guest tonight, Grant Dalgleish from Columbia Games. We're going to be talking about all things Columbia tonight. Welcome aboard.
Sure. Thank you.
Well, it's glad to have you here and talk all about block games and of course we can even talk about Horn World too. Everything you guys got. So
they're both important to me, but we start with block games. I think that's what's expected. So,
yeah.
Block games are going through a renaissance these days. Other companies have been producing them, so it was pioneered by Columbia Games by my dad. Actually, with the company named Gamma 2, but it was my dad back in 1972. We're doing just now our 50th anniversary. It's actually 53, but 50th anniversary edition of Quebec 1759, which was the first block game. And then that spawned a whole genre, a bunch of block games from us, a number of other publishers, and creative efforts from other designers. And today, it's going strong, and it's quite a testament.
It is. I mean, half a century with block games that you guys started, and they've just come full circle, so to speak, with doing a republish on Kickstarter on Quebec. Yeah. So it's great to see that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'll give Quebec credit because I said it in my review for it that I didn't give a whole lot of credence to block games at first. And you guys sent me Quebec, and I tried it out. And I was like, I'll be damned. The game's actually really good. And I was surprised by that. Just it threw me, and I was like, I have left all this gaming goodness off to the side and have been ignoring block games for all these years, and now I'm kind of kicking myself for not trying them out sooner. So I do appreciate you changing my mind on that.
Wow, yeah. Hey, no time but the present still, and I appreciate the compliment. In fact, it touches on what we try to do. My dad's design philosophy, which is mine too, inherited and refined perhaps. It's our philosophy. In one little phrase, cliche phrase, it's let the players play. Mm-hmm. But it manifests itself in all kinds of different things in each different game. And so in Quebec, it's an asymmetrical situation from the get-go, right? And that is one of the neatest things right away, right? You can play both sides of that game and have a completely different experience. And what the tension that comes from the lack of time, the British have the 16 turns to take the Plains of Abraham, Quebec City, and hold it. Elsewise, the river freezes up, and they got to go home. The French are playing a little bit of a delaying game, trading maybe territory and time or territory for time. And all of that kind of balances out so that a really minimum amount of rules are actually required to give the experience. The British tension comes from the time frame, the lack of moves. You only get to make one move, and you're starting on a little island, and you got to get all your guys ashore. It's kind of a slow and painful process, but you can hit hard kind of anywhere, right? So it's neat. You can go up the river a bit, and so many choices. The French player can stand or try to run all the time, but there is a built-in penalty for running. That there could be pursuit fire in battles for one thing, but if you just concede spaces just by running and maybe try to concentrate in the capital, thinking that you'll just await all comers. By the time that they get there, you'll find that most of your troops have gone away because the mechanic is quite clever. It represents how when the places that are taken, and there's these 9 zones on the board, when each one is taken, a French, a Quebec militia just quits, just goes home. The argument here, the historical analog is Wolfe burnt the farms. And he tried to make it a bit of a scorched earth situation here. Because the Quebec campaign is actually a siege that's going on all summer long, right? It finally culminates in September with a big battle. but in the game, man, everything can go differently every time. And so that's the premise: is that the players lock horns with each other, head to head. Quebec even features simultaneous hidden movement, which is actually something we haven't done, ever again in all the other block games since Quebec. The base mechanics involve alternating moves or cards that control movement or headquarters. There's a variety of mechanics that I can both explain in specific and in general. But Quebec's actually the only one with this super secret hidden movement. It's partly because it's clean enough and simple enough that you can do it, right? The order that you have to write is one move, so it's not that right. If it was a more sophisticated situation, a longer game, longer campaign, maybe you might not be able to do it. We're modeling just one summer, fateful summer, 1759. Yeah, like Nate said, it's kind of sneaks up on you how good it really is.
That's what I noticed when I was first reading the rule book, right? Sorry, my kids are going to bed, so you might hear them in the background. I apologize. Go upstairs.
Yeah, you can tell they're going to bed because they sound the same
they're
time
crying.
as Michelle.
When you were playing Quebec, when I sat down, I was first reading the rules, and I'm like, okay, why doesn't the French player just dump everything in Abraham and call it a day, right? And just let the dice gods do what they will. And then, of course, I read further, and the rules aren't long. We're talking 8 pages, right? It's not an extensive rule book by any means. And those 2 mechanics that you put in there that you were just referencing are so key to what makes that a good game. The loss of certain militia each time a space is taken, and then the loss of the other type of militia when what's it called, the upper left zone,
Cap Rouge.
Yeah, Cap Rouge. Yeah, when they take that, there's an ongoing loss of militia.
Yeah, representing Montreal, right?
Yes, yeah. And it behooves the French player to now fight that defensive action that you were just talking about, a delaying action to slow down the British as they're making their advances, because the French are penalized each time they lose ground. So they have to find the best way to hold it back.
Yeah, and somehow you have to find the balance.
Yeah.
Right, between those 2 extremes, essentially, and that's where the game is.
Well, I got a question on that. You're trying to stop the French player from turtling essentially in the capital, and having the benefit of being in the capital and trying to get that last big battle there. If someone does take the losses and say, "I'm going to just pull back to the capital, I'll lose my militia, I don't care." Have you seen anybody do that and win, or not?
Yeah. It was gamed out early on, and the British always win under those circumstances.
Really?
They're block for block. The British Army is professional, and the French are militia and have just a few, quote unquote, real soldiers that are, even their best ones have only 3 steps on them. So, for those of you who don't know what that means, a block, which is the thing we're talking about here, a block game, has blocks in it, and blocks can have potentially 4 steps, and they're printed like 4, 3, 2, 1 clockwise or anti-clockwise around the kind of the perimeter of the center of the unit label with the information. And maybe we'll pull up a graphic here sometime, but a photo of Quebec or Nate's review. You guys can go watch it there too. The British Army, though, has numerous 4-step, good quality regiments, and French don't have as much of that. Only 3-steppers and 2-steppers. Both sides have detachments that are decoys that you can bluff with that can't really hold up. French player also has the Indian, which is kind of a wild card, and it's another sort of, it's a destabilizing effect. It's a tough choice to use them, because if you use them as the French, that's your turn. That's all you get. You can do it actually even every turn if you want, but you won't do anything else. And Indians can't stand in pitched battles. They don't like to, and they just run away. They do certain little things, raiding and scouting, and sometimes they take hits back, but mostly they do it with impunity. So it's tempting to use them, but time. It's an interesting thing. All these things playing together, make a balance that has stood the test of time. Um, the Some say that the British can win a little more often amongst skilled players. I would say it still remains to be seen, really, like statistically. But there are easy bidding mechanics that you can do to, play the better side if you feel it's important in tournaments and things.
Well, the British do have that built-in disadvantage of the river.
Mm-hmm.
So the French have access to the majority of the terrain across the board, at the start, and the French only have those 4 ships, which I viewed as the biggest limiting factor for them, because they have to use
Yeah,
those 4 ships to get upstream to get to Abraham.
right. And you can go the long way, kind of, or the short way, but it takes time. It takes time just to move the ships up the river. If you want to go kind of, that's the long way, and the more direct way is in the lower part of the river where the ships start the game, and you can transport, but it's slow at maximum 4 units a turn, so time's gonna be used, and there's where the French delaying tactics kind of play, because they could, for example, take a stand and try to make a real fight, maybe a reaction force that can jump on the 4 British blocks that are kind of the best the British can get ashore. They start on this Ile d'Orléans and they move across the river to a couple different places, 4 or 5 different places potentially, but typically they're going to go maybe where the French are not, right? I mean, that's a chess game. It's all in the setup too. You can set up any way that you want, which makes it, kind of timeless there too. The French player actually has, in my opinion, a tougher battle to master the game. Like the learning curve to be a really good French player is probably a little steeper, but that's okay. That's part of the game, right? It's if you're setting up with your son or something of that nature, let him play the British, coach him through kind of the straightforward attack and kill, and you try real hard to stop him, and you might find that you can just barely do it. But it's legendary. It's really a beautiful thing.
It's like
That's
tempered
true.
aggression is what's needed for the French. You have to be aggressive at the right time, but you have to know you really do need to play the lagging action really smart. Stop here when you have to engage if you can and if you want to, and then pull back or be forced back until you just keep drawing them in and try to chip away a little bit of them at a time.
Yeah, what you were
Right.
asking about earlier, Mo, about if you just tried to hold Abraham, for the French forces, if the British took everything else, the French are going to lose at least half their forces with their militia being gone. So that's a massive loss to the French, and we're not even talking about the combat losses they would take afterwards. They're already outnumbered at the start, so to lose all the forces they do have, it's impossible. So.
Well, I like the idea of being the underdog anyway when you're playing a delaying action. I think it's kind of cool. You know me, I'm not going to be like, I'm going to run in turtle. Hell no, I'm going to fight. That's the point of playing.
Yeah. And actually, there's another element that kind of, I'll say, destabilizes it. That's a deliberate description, but it's kind of, hear me out, right? In Quebec, when you have battles that arise because I moved where you are, and it's revealed simultaneously, so battles can occur a variety of different ways, but loosely, right? I move where you are, and there are dice that we're going to use to work out the battles, and loosely in Quebec it's quite a simple game. You're going to roll the number of dice equal to the number of steps of soldiers on your blocks that are in the battle. There again, that's where the British, like, they can get 4 blocks, actually could be 16 steps, right? And there's no way the French can put together 16 steps in a compact 4 blocks.
12 would be max.
12 would be the max, and that would probably be, they could only probably do that once. I think the British can do it a couple of times. But what destabilizes the situation and makes it, for example, super tempting for the French to make that stand, like with a mobile counterattack strike force that jumps on the 4 British, before they become 8 British, right? And it comes about because when you have a battle, you set up on a battle board. So it isn't just a dice off with like the 16 steps against the 12 steps, and we're going to see who wins. There's actually a whole other sub game going on here where you have to set up on a little battle board. It's got 3 positions: right, left, center, like a
Mhm.
kind of a period battlefield. You're forced to put one block in each spot. So if you've got 4, as the British do in perhaps this little illustration, they're going to put one in each spot. And they got one more, and you have the option to put it in a place called the reserve, which is clever. From the reserve, you can move to any of the 3 spots, or you can commit to one of them. It's got to be set up though. Like the moment you start the battle, the British player, the defender in this example, sets up, has to commit to where those blocks are. Now, if the French are coming in, let's say they got 7 blocks, because that's totally possible, moving up a road, if they've got this mobile counter-attack force that's strong and planned this, and they come in, now they've got 7, so they only have to put 1 in each spot, and they could then overload a flank or a center with kind of the remainder. Like, so there could be 3 or 4 blocks in any one position, and they start gunning away. And the point here is if you crack any one of the 3 positions in the Quebec, in this game, if you crack any one of the 3 positions in the battle board, the other units melt away. They're routed. They quit the spot.
Let me interrupt you for a sec. Mo, let me share my screen here, and
Sure, go ahead.
I'll have an image. That way people can see what he's talking
Okay,
about.
yeah, good.
Share screen. Okay.
You got the right screen share?
Okay,
No, not that one.
I'm trying here. Allow. All right. Let me.
Okay. Pull your image up first. Yeah,
All right.
here we go.
I got it. Now you
Here we go.
can you see what I got up now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, see, perfect.
There you go.
It's a battle that's set up, and it's actually the center looks good for the British there, right? They might gun down the French, which only got 2 guys. You actually a little tricky from this perspective. You have to look from the perspective of the player. The French player in the center of this map has 1 militia that has 2 steps on it, because I'm looking at it as if I was sitting there. The British player is sitting there with 2 full strength blocks, 8 steps. So 8 on 2, that looks pretty good. So anyway, that destabilizes these situations in that battles can be won kind of a little bit independently of the sheer force. Like it is still clearly weight of numbers is important and that kind of thing. But you might do that very thing we discussed, right? Jumping on the British as a counterattack before they grow in their bridgehead or river crossing is actually a viable strategy. Even with just maybe 5 blocks, you might beat 4 British blocks just with a bit of luck and some tactics.
So if you blow through this line right here, like the British look like they're gonna, it's 8-1 or 4-1, basically 8-2.
Yeah.
You have the British have in the center. So say they blow through the French line right there. The other 2 melt away. You said, now do they scatter and then have to be rallied, or they go away entirely?
They take pursuit fire, so the other side, British side, gets to roll 1 more time, and a bunch more 6s could do a bunch more damage, and then they have to leave the zone that we're fighting in. So if it's on the map here, maybe we're fighting in Lévis, which is just off the right-hand side of the battle board. Yeah, and so now Lévis is one of the places you often fight first because it's on right to the left below Nate's hand, I presume.
Yep.
And the British forces on the Ile d'Orléans, by his hand as well, hop over the water, constrained by the ships, right? 4 ships means 4 blocks. They can go and land there at Lévis, start a battle, and then perhaps, as the same time as they did that, a couple of French came in from Etchemin over to the left and joined that battle. That may be how we got to the battle that we were illustrating. I'm not sure, speculating. but it doesn't matter. In the event that you just described, um, French forces would have to retreat, and the only place they could go is back towards Etcham and upriver there. So there's one kind of snaky road going along the south shore, and that's where they go if they even got out alive at all. So, battles really matter. The actual details of position can prove telling. Make some drama even against maybe an overwhelming force on paper. And every game is different because you move differently, you play out, you bluff and deceive differently. It's just
Sure. Now, I got a question on these. Are all the blocks that are on the map for both players, are they all real units, or are there any dummies?
well, that isn't a complete setup at the moment, but there are some kind of de facto dummies that are one-step blocks,
Mhm.
called attachments, and they are used for that purpose. Both sides have, I think, 6 of them, and they they're like decoys. In fact, in
Okay.
the
Yeah.
original game, they were true blank blocks, and it was a change sometime in the year 2000 or something that they were given their one step. It's interesting, but they have that, and the question that's coming up here, if you want me to pause and answer that, it is
Yeah,
very
go ahead.
topical, right? So you're actually pretty committed in Quebec. Okay, it's a very simple game. If you've committed somebody to one of the flanks, you can't change it. In some of the other games that we later did that use this battle board concept, we have guys moving out of the reserve and round and changing flanks and all that. In this game, it's pretty simple. You just add, from the reserve and gun it out. But that's also to model how difficult it is to do, right? How difficult it is to move in the face of fire.
Yeah.
Laterally. So if we were going to let you do it, it certainly would be back via the reserve, and it would take a long time.
Plus, back then, that's how they moved too. I mean, you'd have to send a command over from, they have to have a runner or a rider that would run over an order and say, take this commit from the reserves, or move the right flank this way, or left flank, whatever. And it's not instantaneous. Today, everything is radios, so everything is pretty instantaneous, and we're used to that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're lucky. We know there's a block there. That's a little bit of intel, but we don't know what it is, and that's a big part of the game. Another thing that's actually important is if you did try to end up with a battle royale, in Quebec City or anywhere else where it came down, really to a real pitched battle, there is a minimum threshold. The British have to hang on to 20 steps worth of guys, or else they die. So that's a mechanic that helps. We're modeling here again some real history in a very simple way. They don't fight to the last man.
Sure.
Regiments break and things happen, and they just can't bear the cost.
Yeah, only in war games do guys fight to the last man, or in some rare instances, Alamo, things like that. Generally, people are not. They're going to break and run.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm pretty convinced that it needs to be in war games too, right?
Mhm.
So we model that in that way. There are other things too. And when I start talking, about other games, in every period or strategic situation that we're trying to play out, you have to use things that deliver the experience of the period and still don't get in the way of the let the players play agenda that we spelled out at the very beginning. And it's kind of an art form, and my dad good at it, and it's neat that so many people get joy out of the creation. It's why I get my thrill out of it, is to play with people and see their eyes light up. It even works online too. It doesn't matter. I play a lot on Rally the Troops, a really cool website for playing free war games, browser based, no install, but it's rules enforced, so it's real. And there's a community of good people. So I'm playing all these games with all these people, and they're actually honored to play me and I'm in parallel honored to play them. So it's it's all fun. That's what we do. We're always trying to distill something that could be sophisticated down into something simple and capture a magic thing. Um, no, actually, the going too fast there on the question. The
Oh,
ABC
sorry.
um, mechanic, okay, is a specific sort of subset um, set of mechanics that came about a little later. It was actually invented for Wizard Kings, which was the year 2000. So, gosh, quite a bit later than the original.
That's half the time of Quebec. It's 25 years instead of 50.
Yeah, yeah. And then we have used that, since then a lot. It's not, by the way, the quick aside. Wizard Kings is not around the troops yet, but it probably will be. I'm fully supportive of it. Tor Anderson, who is the guy behind it, a very, very talented programmer and a big fan of the games. He also helped me um, working with like recently the printing of Alliance and uh, Julius Caesar were the things I'm focused on. I remember him contributing greatly to kind of editing and cross-checking and making sure things were right. That attention to detail shows up in Rally the Troops too. And so it's fun. We have these, just legendary games which go down to the wire and back and forth. And I don't win them all. I will tell you that. I'm humbled quite often, but not that I need to be humbled because I'm not arrogant about that. I play hard, but it's one of the greatest ways. So anyway, block games were around a long time. The ABC thing came around for Wizard Kings for a very specific reason, right? It was a need that was met, and it kind of came organically from a slightly previous, maybe I'll say iteration in the long arc of block game history. The game that was published a couple years before Wizard Kings, '98 it was called Victory. And Victory is a pretty neat game. It's a sandbox game like Wizard Kings, which means that you get the choice to play in the sandbox, building an army kind of your specs, to your specs, usually according to a budget or a scenario, and um, and then go to town, and then you can build different things, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if Victory is kind of like a World War II version of Alliance in the way that it plays.
Well, sure, it would feel a lot like that, but like it's got probably still some very high percentage of the rules are in parallel. Wizard Kings would feel even a bit more like it because of the ABC, which is still in Alliance. But in Victory was actually the first of the block games where we really included blocks for boats and blocks for planes. Because we had done some World War II games. Of course, we don't need them in Quebec, right? And we did have the boats in in these ancient games where applicable. It was the War of 1812 also has them, which is the second game. But when we did our World War II series of games, there was Rommel that was done in first in 1984, and then the East Front series was first 91 and on from there. Still in print, still great games. They abstract the air and the naval kind of out of it, in that there are airstrikes financed or commanded by headquarters, which are positioned on the board, and that's how that part's modeled. And the air sea control is modeled with control ports. If you have the key port in your possession, then you kind of have control of the local sea zone. Controlling routes can lead to more options for sea maneuver and things. But you move the ground units kind of abstractly by port to port by sea. All right. So long-winded. The point here of that is that we hadn't had airplanes and we hadn't had boats kind of integrated with the combined arms that are necessary to make all that work. We hadn't really dealt with that per se. And when we did, it's kind of a mess, or it can be, right? And here, my dad's, solution to the problem was um, that there would be a sequence, and the ABC will come later. Here in Victory, we used what I will now characterize as an absolute sequence. It didn't really have a name at the time; it was just a combat sequence. I say absolute in that it's linear. That it says fighters go first and bombers go second, and then it went submarines, battleships, and then it went tanks, infantry, and this was the sequence. So it didn't matter what happened in a battle. I didn't need to make special rules for it. You could get any old pell-mell mess showing up in a hex according to rules and stacking limits and things. But once it got time to resolve the battle, you just knock all the blocks flat, get into the sequence, and blast away. And there's some other nuance to it, but loosely that's how it works. And it captured kind of some of the complexities of combined arms, air, naval, ground interaction, with, again, kind of not a lot of rules overhead. But it's an absolute sequence, which kind of also meant it's finite. So it worked super well in Victory 1.0. And people were I remember clamoring for like more units, because it was a hot topic for a little while. More maps, more units. And we came up with both the units, a series of blocks called the Elite units for Victory, kind of added more stuff. It was cool. It was like torpedo bombers and new dive bombers and cruisers and destroyers and artillery and kind of everything you'd want, right? That you could then add to your game, and it fit into a new sequence. This is kind of the Elite sequence, which has I think it's 18 slots in it now, right? It's a linear list, and you do have to kind of memorize it or look at it. It was real easy to memorize the Victory one, but once you get to Elites, it's a bit more, and you probably have to reference it at least for a while.
So, do the elites have a separate sequence, or are they integrated into the base sequence?
Integrated. So the sequence went fighters, and actually there was jet fighters that were the super first unit, and then regular fighters, and then I think dive bombers, and then torpedo bombers, and then medium bombers, and then heavy bombers, and all of that before you even get to the submarine, which is the first of the boats, and working your way through the sequence. So it worked actually still mechanically beautifully. Just getting to be a little much and more. That's not even the real point. It's kind of just a bit limiting. We couldn't keep going here, and we knew it. So the point of the digression is that when Wizard Kings comes around in 2 years later, and we're wanting to have really thematic armies, so we've got orcs and elves and undead, and these all need different units, like with different artwork. And we just knew we couldn't have an absolute sequence here anymore. It just wouldn't even make sense, right? Why would an orc be faster than an elf in all other things being equal, right? Or whatever. So from that was born the ABC, which I can now, in hindsight, give it a name. It's a nested sequence.
Oh.
It's like tiered. And it works beautifully. It's actually still basically the same thing if you think about it. The A units are usually air and other really elite units. The B units are typically horses, cavalry, and things of that nature, or ships. And the C units are ground units, infantry. And if we need D or E, which we can use, you might see that the armor were C and the infantry were D or something of that nature. To model all that, and just again, it's sort of a simple way, and that allowed Wizard Kings to have a bunch more unit types. And then sometime later, we did a second edition of Wizard Kings. It's 07 when we did that. It's got way north of 100 unit types that all unique, right? And they all have slightly different ABC combat values. Certainly, they have different artwork and pictures and names. Then they'll have maybe a different cost, which is actually a function of their attributes, like mathematical function and a movement. And all of that is on the block. All this information So now we don't need the chart at all. We just play and tip the blocks forward when we get into a battle and duke it out. And may the best guy win. Right? It works great. And some parallel still. Wizard Kings, it's so many years later, but you fight a battle, and if you hold on as the defender for a certain amount of time, and in that game it's 3 rounds. That's used in other games too, in Alliance, it's there. Then the attacker has to leave. And so you don't always win just because you got more stuff. If it took you time to get there, you might not have enough time, which creates even more drama in the battles. But it feels a lot just like how Quebec feels, with all that tension and the same kind of mechanic that as the places change hands, in a Wizard Kings battle, you grind it out. Somebody wins because either they defended long enough, or the attacker wins because they kind of liquidated everyone, or the other player retreated. And that's a nice little segue, because the retreating is a big part of what is ABC. And so that actually did come about in Victory. It was in that absolute sequence. And then it was again used in Wizard Kings and other things since. Because the key thing about the ABC is that combat sequence, again, like I explained, the elites are first and all that. But when you get to your combat turn, it's shoot or run. That's an actual choice that you make with your unit. Sometimes there are nuances. Some games don't allow you to run in the first round and other things, but loosely speaking, an A unit can get away from a B unit or a C unit. And that models the pursuit fire without any rules at all.
Does Wizard Kings have the same border limits that Alliance does?
Yeah, well, they're a little tighter, actually. But that's because it's easier to go in through multiple hex sides to add up. So they're actually just 2 and 1. 2 for a clear terrain, and 1 if it's mountains or anything else, forests, things like that. But you work the flank, you work around, and so a hex, even in a fairly static line, you can usually get at least 2, and maybe you work around and get a 3rd hex side so that you can overwhelm. That's a part of the game. It's a part of Alliance too, and that's another neat point. The mechanic, like you asked, is actually in parallel. The hex side limits in Wizard Kings are the same as the border limits in Alliance or Hammer of the Scots. Now in Quebec, we didn't put a border limit. We just have a real world set of limits that come about because you get to make exactly 1 move. And you're just never going to get that many guys in one place.
Well, you're scaled in. You're too tight in the action there for the border limits to really apply.
Yeah,
the border limits work at a higher elevation view.
Right. And where they first came in to the design history of the Columbia games is Napoleon, which is the 3rd game in this early arc. It was Quebec, the War of 1812. There's 2 Canadian topics, and Napoleon, the Waterloo campaign, which is actually still to this day the most kind of well-known at the broadest level Columbia title, because it's been published a lot. Avalon Hill really popularized it in like 1975 when they got it under license from my dad, and it was big, real big. But it introduced road limits, and that's the perfect time to do so, because Napoleon is got a great big army that he's put together here in the 100 days campaign, and he's in northern France, and he's trying to get maybe between the British and the Prussians that are gathering to take him out in Belgium. That's where this theater is all taking place. And you've got constraints. You can only put a certain amount of blocks up a road, and it's not that many. And so you have to move around, use multiple roads, and try to time it so that you arrive in the battle at the right time. That's how generals had to think about it. And Napoleon has another really neat element to it, that the battles, which use the battle board basic concept that we saw in Quebec earlier in the video, right? right? Left center. But the battles in that game also grow, and it's pretty neat. So, there's like the strategic turn where the player moves and maybe starts a battle by moving some forces into an enemy town up a road. And they might do it with a couple of roads, but they might also end up with some pieces, some units that couldn't get to the battle, but could get adjacent to the battle. And so one town removed, either on either end. You can maybe even sneak around the flank or something and get try to come in the back. But if you have units that are in places that are adjacent to the battle, while the battle is actually ongoing, every turn they start filtering in, and it's by the road. You can get two guys up a big road and only one on a little road, but they filter in and they grow. And this actually is how the Battle of Waterloo is modeled in the Waterloo game, because it's one of the things we always do is kind of storyboard the real history and make sure the game can deliver that, and then a bunch of other things. But the Battle of Waterloo happens where the Prussians are the ones kind of filtering in late in the day and turning the tide, and you can see that happen in the game. It has another important element that I suppose was borrowed from Quebec, that there are 3 supply cities on the map. Liège for the Prussians, and Brussels is in the middle for the Anglo-Dutch, and Ghent is also there. And when I say the middle, it's just because I visualize it on the map, that Liège is up in the upper right, and Brussels is right up the middle, and Ghent is over there on the left flank. And that's how Napoleon looked at it, I think. Is it, do I go this way or do I go that way? And in the end, he went kind of up the middle and fought at Quatre Bras, which is a 4-way, quatre meaning 4 and bras arms, 4 arms. You guys all know that, but anyway, it's that battle goes on simultaneously, kind of, with another one called Ligny.
Some people might have thought that was 4 braziers, not 4 arms.
They definitely might have. All right, so we've done our public service announcement here.
Yeah, little education, guys.
Yeah.
Other languages.
Culture, we.
Yeah.
That's good. So the battles in the real history are Quatre Bras and Ligny, and against respectively the British and the Prussians, and Napoleon wins both those battles. And then Wavre is kind of a battle against the Prussians that got out of Ligny, and kind of wins that too. But again, Prussians get out of that intact enough that they show up at Waterloo, which is the sort of followed up on Quatre Bras. The British make a stand, and they kind of have to, they feel, there, because it's on the road to Brussels, and there's some reason not to let that go. In the game, it's modeled by a supply rule. So that, I mentioned a while ago how it's connected to Quebec. In Quebec, right, if you take Cap Rouge, you're cutting off Quebec from Montreal. So we model that with Lost Soldiers, and we do exactly the same thing. It's Prussians from Liège and an Anglo-Dutch from either of the other cities, and 2 Prussians if it is Liège. And they make your army melt away pretty fast. And in that game, half of your army is the magic number, and it's tight already. The British army in that game has 18 blocks. It's the whole game, 18 blocks, and the French have 25. The Prussians have about 18 or 20 some. So there's not a lot that you can lose before the rest of your army won't fight anymore. And there again, we're modeling something that, like you mentioned, not all war games do, but I think it's essential for capturing the experience, for some reality, but also for the fun of it. There's 2 benefits, right?
Yeah. It's funny because Ed over here, I know where he got it from. Plus de chance, wait, hold on, I'm screwing.
Let me do it. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
Yeah, but are you gonna do it right? I was trying to sing it, but not sing it. Like Eddie Lee.
Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
Yeah, there you go. because and I can't sing, so that's why I was screwing it up. But
The more it
um,
changes, the more it stays the same.
more it
Yeah.
stays the same, exactly. And that's what I was hearing in my head. I know Ed meant it that way.
Mhm.
But we do have one question here from Tim. He said, "Great topic, guys. I enjoy Columbia games, but often have to play online due to lack of a second player. Are there possibilities for more solo bot rules in future games?"
Yes, and a lot of that actually. I'm kind of hot on it right now. Um,
Nice.
yeah, combat infantry does have bot rules. Okay, that
Nice.
game. It's a World War II tactical game, and it
Hmm.
does tell you how to move the other side, and it's okay. You know, it's
Hmm.
actually works pretty good mechanically. Works great actually, and the the neat thing in combat infantry is there's an interleaved game turn. That's the term I'll give it. It's not really in the rules like that, but it's interleaved or staggered, and so all of the both players, typically two-player game, have headquarters and their platoon headquarters, which command squads, and there's a battalion above that. But these guys have to be in the right spot to command. That's the first thing. You got to be with your soldiers and only one space away from them to order them to command. And they're scarce. They run out of energy, is how we're modeling here. The leaders expend steps to issue commands to fire or move, and then the soldiers execute on that if they're in the correct, um, if they got the order.
Hmm.
Um, and the leader is dialed down. So that's his scarcity. Like leaders have a couple of steps, 2 or 3 steps, and the use of them um, runs them out. Okay, but
Hmm.
also what is on the map, right? I've got in front of me my blocks, my map, and typically, 3 platoon leaders are what make up the whole thing here, and you got 3 as well, and I'm gonna move one of my choice, and you're gonna move one of your choice, and when you do, like 3 blocks are gonna act, and not a lot. It's a little localized slice of a turn,
Hmm.
and then I'm gonna go, you're gonna go, I'm gonna go, you're gonna go, but I can't choose the same one. So
Yeah.
after 3 back and forths, we will have all moved, and then we will kind of advance the time clock by 10 minutes or an hour or whatever we're talking about. But the interleaved system actually it works in solitaire because you get some uncertainty about that, and uncertainty is what kind of makes solitaire work better than straight up, right? There's the most basic concept, right? Is there's bot rules that say this is how you move the enemy and how you react to this situation or that situation. But you have to make the thoughts and the plans.
Hmm.
Um, and you can, I mean, you can play mechanistically. You can play a block game with the blocks face up and know
Sure.
everything. You can also play it just as is with hidden blocks. And if you just walk around the table, frankly, you'll forget quite a bit,
Oh yeah.
especially if you give it some time. But you definitely can't, deeply deceive yourself, right? So um, that's lost. Hey, here's my turn for a little entertainment. My
Yeah.
dog is excited because the wife he's gonna howl for a little minute. It
There
sounds
you
like
go. Can hear him.
yeah, sounds like someone's killing him down there. It's crazy, but he's an Australian Shepherd and he just loves us.
I was
This is
wondering if it was a husky or if it was a shepherd. Yeah, because how loud. Yeah.
a little mini Aussie, and
Nice.
it's funny. So this is trademark.
But it was
Um,
funny because that was one of the games I wanted to ask about
okay,
was
yeah,
combat infantry because you were saying about how the leaders have a certain amount of like you were saying power essentially to where they deplete after a while. I was wondering that started getting me thinking. I'm curious now to know more about how that works because is there a way or would it be possible with the way that works to where you can maybe introduce a new mechanic like something like momentum where you take away some of the other leaders' juice or their energy or whatever, their order capabilities. And that way you get it to one of your leaders because now you're inside their OODA loop and you're kind of got the momentum on them where you limit their movement and you can move and you can react better than they can. at least for a short period of time, maybe for one turn or something like that. Things like that would be kind of neat to play with too, if possible.
It's clever. I think my quickest answer for that are we have in some of these games used cards to introduce some really neat things
Mm-hmm.
that are mechanically important sometimes for modeling the history of the period, but also um, innovative and interesting, and mainly add a little element of uncertainty. I'm thinking of some mechanics in Julius Caesar, for example, is just one of all these games. One of the key hallmarks of the game is you can only attack your enemy when you're adjacent. So you have to kind of move up to him, and then if he doesn't leave, then you can attack him on your next turn. Um, and he might jump on you instead, or these kind
Mm-hmm.
of things happen in the card order. It's very important for determining who goes first. So there's some tension in that, which we may get to talk about. But there's also in that game just one card called Mercury. The special cards in Julius Caesar are named after Roman gods. There's Mercury, Mars, Apollo, Jupiter, etc. Mercury actually breaks that rule. Mercury lets you attack with one group of guys from 2 spaces away. He's the swift messenger of the gods. So there's the cute corollary, and it's in there um, for game value because it means you don't always for sure know that you're safe just because you're 2 spaces away. The other guy might have Mercury, and if you don't have it, especially, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's interesting too because the game has communal cards. We both have the cards, and so it's one deck, and we deal them out. And there's 27 cards in the deck. We're each going to be working with 5 in a given game year. So I know what I got, and I don't have a clue what you got because I don't know what's in the deck. And the tension is pretty great. But coming back to combat infantry, it's there too for some of the same reason. It's a little more direct. Like, what order do you activate your leaders in is strategic.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to forget totally the solitaire thing, so make sure you come back on that. But
Sure.
a little more on combat infantry, how when you resolve the game, turn by turn, and there's a scenario typically that says you only have so many turns before you have to win or lose, because it's a localized, a little slice of a much bigger situation.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have your orders to do your thing, and so in the mechanic with this interleaved activations, okay, on the turn you can activate one guy and order like 3 guys to do something. Could also be some what we call battalion assets, and eventually you will activate your battalion HQ and maybe order some artillery strikes and things like that. And we certainly have armor in the game that move pretty fast. Vehicles move pretty fast on the board.
Mm-hmm.
But they also there's armor class effectively, and you basically can't shoot them without better weapons, heavy weapons. It'll just kind of bounce off. We modeled it in a super simple way with an armor class, and it subtracts from your firepower, so you just don't get through. You don't get through.
Yeah.
But the neat thing kind of comes from all of that when you kind of put it all together is we've captured all kinds of sophistication of squad level combat without the binder of rules, right? Without the whole big long package of things. A particular mechanic that's famous and in squad or tactical combat that I remember in the design effort was like sacrosanct or like a holy grail. Like, we have to model this, and it's called opportunity fire. You guys all know the concept,
Opportunity
right?
fire and line of sight, the 2 major things in tactical games.
Yeah. Yes. So we did solve line of sight in probably the fairly traditional way, blocking terrain. If it's further away than equidistant, it doesn't block you. If it's closer, then it does. And you just draw a line, and if it's clear, you can shoot. If it's not, you can't. It's binary. But the other one is even more interesting because I didn't want an artificial response phase. I didn't want opportunity fire at all. So I got rid of it. I threw it out literally,
Hmm.
and that's again like, how do you get away with that? Well, you do, because of the localized slices. Like when you're activating your one little platoon, it's only going to move 3 guys or shoot, and you can't move that far, and you can't move past someone else. Just if there's someone there and they have um, either a block, you certainly can't move past them if you move into them, but you also can't move past them one space removed, like a zone of control that stops you. So just by breaking it into these little slices and interleaving the turn, we were able to throw out the whole rule. And I and that almost illustrates the Columbia Games or Tom Dalglish thought process.
Mhm.
Can we do that? Can we get away with throwing out the rule that is actually almost holy grail to this kind of
Yeah,
game?
that's total blasphemy to not have that.
I know, but we did it, which is,
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's bold, and I think we got away with it. People say good things about the game. It's still not very well known, um, but when you guys get some time and drill into it, I'm pretty sure you'll find that the overall package kind of does the job. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
that,
because I mean, the thing that interests me on it, because Gimpy and I both love tactical games, but the whole idea of it being a block game, so it's actual fog of war when you're playing, is the biggest cool thing about it. Because the hardest thing to do when you're playing any sort of tactical system is having God mode. You know exactly what's out there, even if you have a solo bot or whatever, which does work and can make the game enjoyable and better than it would be when you're playing both sides. And we can, once you've been playing war games a long time, you can play both sides fairly well and play honest. But
uh-huh.
still, not knowing what's over on the other side is so much better because you're like, okay, now how do I move? Where's my base of fire? Do I use my maneuver element? Do I run right into their heavy machine guns or whatever? A tank. That's the thing. You don't know because you can't see. So
Because
movement becomes
that's
more
really the way
critical.
it is, right? We've
Yeah.
seen in the World War II movies, it's walking around and then just bam, 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 lots of fire,
Yeah.
and then it's quiet again for a long time, and then
Yeah. To me, that's just so cool.
yeah,
And
it
if you
really
can play
works.
it solitaire, it's even better.
You can, although
Yeah.
now that'll segue me into the
The
solitaire.
solo bots. Hmm.
Yeah, because so in Alliance, which is the newest, like new Columbia Games title, it's its own topic that we reprinted Quebec because we actually have all of our games in print, almost. It's like a thing that once they've been printed, they're supposed to be timeless, and I'm proud of that. And I keep them in print. I upgrade them with each edition, and we're on a pretty good campaign for that right now. Quebec is gorgeous. On the recent editions of Julius Caesar and before that Rommel and Desert, they're big upgrades. But Alliance is a new
Actually,
game which also got
Mo,
the
if
last
you'll
stream.
share my screen again, I've got Alliance pulled up.
Yes.
Go ahead and pull it up.
All right.
There we go.
There's a still for you. Go ahead.
That's pretty.
That's gorgeous. Yes. So there's a still there. It's all the blocks are laid flat, so you're not seeing here the fog of war, right? They stand up, and then you can't see what they are from a particular side. It's an interesting issue also, by the way. When you have 7 players, you may have a problem with facing, because it works really well with 4 and certainly with 2. But for the sharks who consider it important, you can turn your blocks upside down. You can just tip them flat when you're done moving, and it does solve the problem if there even is one. But I wanted to talk about solitaire, and so for Alliance, as we know that it's a kind of more popular topic to have solitaire than before, we did work on a bot-driven game where you, as the player, were the French, and cards kind of governed how coalitions of allied groups would work their way towards Paris, kind of giving routes that they would follow, and you could try to get in the way as the French and riposte the relentless Allied advance, and in that way win the game. it did work mechanically. It was okay, but you're playing both sides here, and although you're mostly the French player, that was the beginning of my like inspiration, was realizing, okay, wait, we don't have to play both sides like equally. We could do something creative here, and that's how you kind of were the French, but the other sides were coalitions that were not quite you. And you couldn't quite manage them in the way that you wanted. But still, that's bought stuff, right? So, um, didn't love it, and I had a wake up in the morning, kind of hop out of bed, write it down idea, um, and let me tell you about it. So you set up the alliance game, just kind of like what we're seeing there on the screenshot, except you actually turn all the blocks upright and then away from you. If you're just a solitaire player, you can sit maybe on the south side of the board there and turn all the blocks so they're all facing away from you. And you've set up the game according to the historical setup, which can be for 1804 or 1808 or 1812 to your liking. All three will work. Set it up as per, turn all the blocks away from you. Take the cards, which we don't see in the picture here, but the cards are a big driving part of this game. There are 42 of them in the game, and each one is unique in terms of, it tells you the initiative, the order of play. There are 42 unique cards, so that we know always by the play of a card, like who's got the higher card. There are no ties in that sense, like every card is unique. When you have 7 players around the table and you play maybe 7 cards, and it dynamically, the order of play will be literally by the descending order of cards, starting at the top, working your way down through the sequence. And it's neat in the game. It's all over the place. Or you never know if you're going to go first or 7th, really. And you play a card kind of with that in mind, but the other guys are doing the same thing. But so in the solo game, I take the same deck of cards. There are 42 of them, and I just make a shuffled up pile, and I pull 16 of them off into a different pile. And this is going to drive the solitaire game. It's going to be a 16-turn game. And I'm going to flip over one card. And it's going to be, let's say, Spanish, because there's Cuesta there in the picture in the freeze frame. That's a Spanish card. I know it because he's the yellow color. The color coding is how you know. It also matches the blocks. But like the green card is Russian. So in the solo game, I'm using the card to tell you who you're going to play this turn. So this is a 1/16 of the game that you're going to play the Spanish. So now you rotate all the Spanish blocks around so you can see them. And you think about, what can you do with your card, which allows you, as all cards do, 3 actions. 3 moves or builds in Alliance. Moves like group moves, which means all the people in one area can move into an adjacent place, or they can radiate outward for 1 move. Or you can step up a block, dialing it up, say from 2 to 3, for 1 of those actions as well. But you get 3 to choose from. And your agenda here as the solo player is to grow, to optimize your turn. And with the Spanish army, it's actually, it would be interesting. You might look around you and you see that Portugal is maybe a kind of ripe target, or there's some value in the oceans. There are stars that dot the seas in the picture there. I can see 3 of them in the Atlantic with the number 1 in each one. Those are also targets. They're victory points and gold economic points in the game. And so in the solitaire game, you might go after those. You're going to make your 3 moves. You might do some building, but I think mostly you move. And there will be some battles. If you do get in a battle, the other guy doesn't really do anything. He just defends, and they eventually retreat. And I think we got the rule in there that if they're at level 1, they retreat. It's a simple little mechanic. But otherwise, they just defend. And we're dealing with a little localized slice here. In this 1/16 of the turn, I'm going to play Spain. I'm going to do one little thing or 3 little things, but it's kind of one little thing. And if I can score a point, let's say Spain moves their navy really optimally and conquers all 3 zones there in the North Atlantic. Like a couple of them are empty, and there's a British fleet in one of them, and so they push them out of there. Let's say all that happens. The Spanish turn has resulted in 3 points, or +3. And here's the real key to the solitaire innovation that we have here. You're going to write that down as a cumulative score. So you in the first turn, the first 16th of the game, got 3 points. That's actually really good, because the next thing we're going to do is you're going to stand the Spanish blocks, kind of back up the way they go and turn them away from you, and you're not Spanish anymore. In the second card, you're going to flip off from the pile. It could be Russian. It could be Spanish, actually, but it's, there are 7 cards in there with an equal distribution, so likely you're not Spanish again. You're somebody else. And let's say you're Russian. So you look over at the Russian setup, you turn all the Russian blocks towards you, and you play the optimal turn with the 3 actions that you think will score you potentially the most points. So it's a little microcosm here. This time you're Russia. And if you can score a point, or you can actually lose a point. It can happen if you you won't do it more than once, but if you abandon a territory, it might revert to the enemy, or abandoning a sea zone so it becomes neutral. You could go down, but likely you only make that mistake once, and you will every turn, first turn Spanish, second turn Russian, third turn, say, Austrian, fourth turn British, whatever. Each time you try to optimize the turn and write down the score. And at the end of the 16 cards, if you have scored 16 points, which is, of course, an average of 1 per turn, then you win. And if you didn't, if you came up short, then you can hang it up and play again. So that's the agenda of the game. It's the cumulative points that you obtain for optimizing each turn. And you can try to set things up. You can try to be clever, but it's hard. You don't know what you're dealing with, and you have to deal with it dynamically as you get dealt the card. What it does that all solitaire games do that's wonderful is it teaches you the game quite quickly, because you're handling all of these different armies in context. And so you're seeing all of the important terrain and the localized opportunities that each of these 7 armies have, which will make you an expert on the game in much shorter order than I would say otherwise in the other more typical solitaire model, where you focus on one side. But that's just a perk. Its main purpose is that it's actually a game, right? The game is optimizing the turn, and you can, there's still dice and things that make it random and exciting whether you actually win a battle or not. But loosely, you're very much in control of your situation, as in the chaos of reacting to whatever card you are. Okay, key elements to this are twofold. One is the cumulative points, and the second is uncertainty of who you're going to play. And we stumbled across this. I stumbled across it because of the cards. The cards that we used that unique 42 cards to determine the order of play, but actually the color coding on the cards wasn't as important for that. Those are actually in the game, in the regular multiplayer alliance game. They're a bonus. So if you're playing a Spanish player, like if you're the human playing the Spanish and you play that Cuesta card, instead of 3 moves, you get 4, just a little perk. But otherwise, any player can play it, and its function mainly was to establish the order of play. But then the two things went together with this solo game, and just like an aha moment that it's interesting to play the localized little slice of 1/16 of the game with 1 power and try to maximize it and score, and then to play the next one with the next as the card goes. And it's neat. It works.
It does sound really cool. I love that. And the game is beautiful that Gimpy was showing. So
Thank
it's
you.
really neat to see that. Yeah.
It's a gem. People are really liking it. They're having fun with it because we again struck the chord or the seam. It's not complicated. It's kind of clean and the rules are predictable. Um, the Especially if you've got any experience with these block games, you're going to find the learning curve into them is very clean. And if it's
Yeah.
your first one, it makes an excellent first one. Partly because you can sit and play solitaire the day you get it, but also because you can play it with any number of players. It's quite neat. We're 2 players, and it's dynamic from there too. Like most typically, probably the first time you play with 2 players, you'll play the British and the French, and all the other 5 armies will be what we call non-player empires. There's a diplomacy mechanic for kind of bidding them or buffeting them from side to side. It's cool. It's clean and cool too. You'll like that when you read that. And guys, you can all go download the rules to these games. They're all from my website. I make you go through the process of creating an account and kind of getting the rules, but they're all free and they're a good read. Like they're a really good read, each and every one of them, especially if you're a mechanics guy, because you can see some usually right there in the rules. And we also tend to use a trick, a design format in the rules called 3 columns with a sidebar. And the sidebar often justifies the rule or adds some historical commentary. It's a very nice read, really. Like you sit there and read the rules to Crusader Rex, and you'll know probably more about the Third Crusade than you did from high school.
Oh, that's what I noticed about the
Yeah.
both of the rule books, Quebec and Alliance, is half an hour, and I was done with the rule book, understood the game, the rules were clean, they were streamlined, just like you were saying, and I played Alliance second, and I was expecting the combat to be the same, block game, similar setup, and it was actually fairly different. It uses the ABC system that you were talking about, but it's intuitive. The artillery fires before the cavalry. The cavalry charges before the infantry. The infantry is going to fight, and then if you have any ships, they're going to be handled there at the end.
Yeah, indeed. It has been refined now, 50 years with blocks and the basic things like the fog of war and the step reduction. That's pretty dialed in. It hasn't really changed, I suppose, but pretty dialed in. The and then the mechanic, whether the combat ABC or other things, is refined over all these iterations in different games to where it works pretty good. I've even been accused of like just kind of reskinning. Some people have been a little, I would say, condescending and perhaps typically having read the rules and not played the game. I'm going to assume that, maybe a little over assumption, but when I am challenged on that front, I naturally get a little defensive because there's a lot more than that. If it was a simple reskin, like all I got to do is change the artwork and I go from the Crusades to some other period, man, well, I would do that, guys. I mean, if it was easy, I would do it. It isn't. It is in fact quite a lot of deep thought goes in to how to essentially reskin a game from one period to another so that it feels mechanically the same, but you can't just slap pictures on it. Like
Well, I mean, that's not really fair because how many companies out there use similar game mechanics for
They all do.
multiple
Yeah,
games?
all games do. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you've got the
there's nothing
Leader
wrong with it.
series, or the GMT's got that 43 series, Lerno, and all the others set in the same. They all use the same framework. They might have different specialized rules for that theater, but they're all using the same framework, so they can't really ding you on that. Plenty of game companies do that. I can't think of one
Well,
game company that doesn't do that.
in a way, for sure, but it has been said, and so I'm quite armed with very nuanced explanations of how it actually comes about. I've told the story like in linear fashion about each game. We did a little bit of it here, right? We started with Quebec and kind of bounced around, but I could talk for hours about it because there's a lot of games and a lot of years. But when we if we do that and we go through it like bit by bit, then that you do see how things evolve, how I like didn't have that option before, and now I do, and we apply it, and so there is an iterative process going on alongside the historical, touching on the different periods, and that's what we're trying to do, is to capture the most essential part of a period, of a game, of whatever we're talking about, so that it feels um, like an
Each is
experience.
unique. Yeah, you're getting a different experience each time, even though maybe there's familiarity. Excuse me, especially if you play one game. Then, like Fango was saying, a game series keep your reading minimized. If you go from one block game to another, you're already familiar after playing the first one how it works. So you just have to see what's different in this iteration of a game, whatever the subject matter is. And it's easier because you're already familiar. And when you're familiar, you're going to want to play that game.
You're familiar not only with the mechanic part, but you're also pretty quickly, I think, as a block gamer, familiar with the design intent.
Mhm.
And you can reason out what we meant, because it's gonna hold up. But there's another thing that it makes me inspired to mention, that it's true that many companies and many lines will iterate, like we talked about, and some of those sandbox schemes in particular, right? It's just keep adding scenarios, and that's how you keep developing the game. But with there's a very, to me, it's like a fork about how you approach it, because I think there's like the cheap and easy way, and the much harder to come up with nuanced and subtle way. And to explain what I meant by that, I'll try to use an illustration that's direct, which you guys, neither of you have played Hammer of the Scots, is that correct? Okay, but
No.
it's okay. It's all right. It's an alliance-like block game, right? It's got ABC units. It was actually published just after Wizard Kings, back in the history, like '02, and so it was like the first historical game to use that ABC system, but it could be likened to Wizard Kings in Scotland. And it's an epic game. I mean, it's really hammer and tongs, like down to the every single decision really matters, every step really matters, and the tension that comes in it from its asymmetry. It's got cards that also make movement to be a real issue. You just can't do it all. So it's just intense. Okay, but when we were making the game, we have this kind of basic like thing you got to address, is that this, it's actually a little bit like Quebec. Right? The Scottish army can't really stand and fight against the best of the English army. And that's witnessed in history. Kind of most times when there's a real fight, the English come out on top. There's a few exceptions, but most of the time in that period. So we got to model that, right? And we also are trying to specifically represent a very important thing that's famous in this campaign about the king. The king, well, there's two kings: the Scottish king, who doesn't exist, and the Scottish are trying to get one, trying to crown one. But the English king, Edward, right? Longshanks. We all know the movie, and in history, he himself went to Scotland a couple of times, but only a couple of times, and the army, with him or without him, only went kind of way deep up into Scotland a few times. It really had a hard time doing it logistically and stuff, but we needed to model all that, and there was at one point in the design there was like a schedule, and first it was a linear schedule that it comes in certain years, then it was randomized, and so the English army is going to come in this year and that year, but it sucks. Both players know it, we hate it. So we came up with something. It's just it threw out all those things, threw them all to the side, and said, okay, what we're going to have is there's kind of always going to be an English army. Very simple mechanic. You just draw 50% of the available blocks that are in the pool, and you get them at the start of the year, the start of the campaign season in Hammer of the Scots. You get this pretty great English army. It's usually 5, 6, or blocks or so. It's big, powerful knights and archers and infantry and stuff, and you get them in England, which is at the bottom of the board, and you can move them, but there's just a super simple rule that if you're moving them, they all move for an action if they're moving into Scotland. So, I've kind of touched on it a couple times here, the concept of a group move. That is a mechanic that is in a lot of these games. It's where all the blocks in a given location are defined as a group, and they can activate for a group move and then move or radiate out. If they do so, then they become multiple groups, which creates inefficiency next time. But anyway, a group move is a very important thing, and so you have to choose, which group to move, whether you're the Scottish player or the English player, and then normally it's a whole group. So if these blocks were anywhere else but here in England at the start of the game, you could move all 6 of them for like the price of one action. But again, to model all the things I talked about for a while ago there with like no rules, we just charge you an entire action to get a block over the border. So if you're going to get those 6 guys over the border, it's going to take you a while. 3 cards are quite scarce. That you're dealt 5 cards in a year. It's another kind of somewhat well-refined mechanic. You saw it in Alliance. You're dealt 4 cards. Well, Hammer of the Scots is the same premise 20 years before. 5 cards makes up a year, and you have them in your hand, and they're 1s and 2s and the occasional 3 card and some special cards, but mostly 1s and 2s. And you can play them, and if you get a great hand as the English, like a couple 3s dealt to you and a couple 2s, well, what that is meant to kind of model is that's when it happened in history that they really went north in force. And because you can do it, you can get 3 blocks over the border in the first turn and 3 more over in the second turn. And now you got a great big army of 6 guys kind of just in southern Scotland, and you may have enough time with the other 3 cards to push up into Scotland. And there's a whole thing where the king can stay for the winter if you've got him, but you don't even always have the king. That's another thing. Every turn, you got those 6 blocks, start of the year. You also normally play with them, and then they all leave. They go home at the end of the summer campaign after the 5 cards. They pretty much all go away. Some nuance, infantry can stay if they're supported in the right castles and things, but basically the English army just melts away. But then it comes back again. And each time you're drawing half the blocks from the pool, the king may or may not be in the stack. And you will not let your opponent know whether the king is in the stack or not, if you're smart, until the 5th turn when you decide the king is actually staying in Scotland. And if you do, right, you can do this. It's a tough choice, because if you do, you don't get a levy. You don't get 6 more blocks. You got what you got, but you are able to keep it there in Scotland and start the next year from that spot. And so it's very interesting. Finally, you can only do it once in a row. Like if you do it, then you got to go home. And a year later, you can do it again. But here's my points. Coming back to cheap and easy ways to theme up a game and cover the history or whatever, and then like what I'm going to call elegant ways. Like rather than just slap on some historical overlays, some charts or some other things, we actually still let it be the player choice, right? You can move that English army across the border even when you have a kind of crappy hand, and you can do it. It's just there's a debate about the efficiency, but the whole package, all the things together, the asymmetry of the armies, the scarcity of the movement, the winter mechanics, There are also Hammer of the Scots has these just awesome mechanics for nobles. The 14 Scottish nobles that are on the game are kind of the heart of the game. And there's actually a blue for the Scots and a red for the English version of each block. And we're switching them out all the time throughout the game.
Yep.
And they are the score, which is pretty trippy. Like the score of the game is how many nobles are on your side of your color. And you accomplish that by force, like killing them will force them to be on your side, modeling the idea that like the heir just said, all right, you killed my dad. I don't like you, but I'll be on your side for like at least the next half an hour. And also a really cool thing about Hammer of the Scots is his position. If you can sit on an enemy noble's home territory, which is marked on the board, and the winter comes, he comes home and he submits in the same way as if you'd killed him and also joins you. So that's the score in the game is dynamic by the nobles you control.
Mm-hmm.
So that's already super innovative, right? None of that existed in any other game, and it really models this fickle Scottish lords that bounce back and forth, and you really couldn't count on them. But
You could take that and roll it into a samurai game,
you could.
because that would be very
Yeah.
similar, even worse. They were even worse at switching sides.
Yeah, and we very well might do that actually, but I would still not. I would not just take a super shortcut there and just convert all the blocks to samurai from Scottish.
Yeah. I'm just saying you
It
have
would be
the
so
framework for it already. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, effectively, I've got a framework for every period that there is. It's just I don't have enough time and energy and to do it all. It's and some of it, of course, hasn't been innovated or iterated, right now, but it could be done. Bruce McFarlane, who is the kind of one of the main guys behind Alliance, so he conceived it at the beginning. Yeah, there you go.
Nobunaga, yeah.
He wanted the grand strategic Napoleonic game, and he kind of conceived it and presented it to my dad and I, and we all worked together to make it happen. And he's working on a Vietnam game, right? And so there's a whole different set of things. It's kind of called Quagmire as a working title. He's figuring out kind of some elegant ways to get the Quagmire effect, which is always what you're looking for, right? Some key set of effects to deliver an experience that's fun and engaging, that teaches you, a bunch about the history, not just what happened, but what might have happened, right? And man, that's why we do this. It's to really live that out, and it's
to connect with and explore pieces of history. So, but now you have me totally interested now in this, the combat infantry, because I saw that not only do you have West Front, but you have East Front, and I love East Front. So I was like, oh, now I definitely have to check that out.
Everybody wants East Front. West Front so much better.
East Front, I love East Front.
Well, the tactical stuff is actually pretty good, I think, in both. But since you mentioned East Front and West Front, we have a couple of other games actually called East Front and West Front, and it's confusing. I have Combat Infantry East Front and Combat Infantry West Front, and then I kind of have like a regular East Front and a regular West Front, which are core level, big boy war game simulations.
Nice.
And East Front's the granddaddy of those. Came out in 1991. And oh man, is it legendary? I mean, I could talk to you for an hour about the design and the tactics and the strategy. And if I had some graphics and things, I could make you an expert probably.
Nice.
But oh boy, it's a good one. So next time, on Ian Charlie.
There you go. Well, the other interesting thing is here that really I think speaks very highly of Columbia Games is you can hear your enthusiasm for the products. And it started 50 years ago with your dad, and you're carrying the torch, which really speaks highly of Columbia Games. And if anybody is curious about checking out any of your games, I posted the link up there before. Just go to ColumbiaGames.com, check it out. And there's plenty of games out there. There's even RPGs with Horn World out there. So you got plenty of options. And I do not own any Columbia games myself, but now I'm definitely going to look into combat infantry for sure, for starters, because that is right up my alley. And of course the other games too, like Alliance sounds interesting. East Front, West Front, they both sound interesting. Quebec, that Gimpy's been playing, he's been telling me a lot of good things about it as well. So I was like, wow, that's a game I could probably even get my wife to play because she likes that type of, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way. She likes that Stratego type of game, and that would be the easiest way I could explain it to her. Would be like it's similar to Stratego, you know.
Fine.
So she would
It's
go,
like
okay, yeah, I'll play it.
Big Boy Stratego.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, she doesn't play war games, so if I told her it was Stratego, she'd have a point of reference then, and she'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll try it, and I think she would, you know, do great, especially give her the British, and then I'd just run the French, so it'd be fun.
Well,
Oh,
that's a great thought. I do use that game, and Julius Caesar is another one I use a lot for like first introduction to war games. Because the thing is, you know, if you think about it, there are a lot of people out there that could be war gamers that just don't know it.
Yeah,
You're not going to become a wargamer by accident in this day and age. Like it's very unlikely. It's someone's going to kind of teach you.
You have to go looking for it.
Yeah. And do you even know? I mean, every time I've found so many people over the years that, you know, I've never heard of it at all. The entire concept is completely alien to them. They may have heard of Risk. That's about it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you know, 90% of people probably aren't that interested, but it's still necessary to keep offering because those guys that are, it can open up a whole new world, like a very important part of their lives. I have some, you know, really legendary friendships and connections for all these years, and then just through kind of osmosis or whatever, that knowing some other people that have played against each other, you know, since the dawn of time, kind of, and the stories they tell. It's really, really great. So that's actually, it's going to be my shtick here for 2025. Is make a wargamer, guys.
Yeah.
Take the time, find the regular guy who's smart and educated, pick the right game. It doesn't have to be one of mine, but it might be a good idea. And take the time and introduce them. And if it doesn't work, don't worry about it. Just do it again.
I grew 4 of my own. I'm raising them right now.
He's got his own little fire team.
Yep.
That's a good ratio, because I was thinking we're going the wrong way generally, right? They're dying off. So
We're still backfilling them because when you think about it, back when your dad came out with this game, at that time there was always the graying of the hobby's dying off. 50 years later, look at us.
Yeah.
Newer war gamers come in all the time. You're taking over for him. It continues to grow. So it may not be growing gangbusters like Magic the Gathering, but no other game is out there growing like Magic the Gathering does. So
I mean, come on,
you know,
when I started my channel, there was only a handful out there that covered like real war games. And now there's at least triple, quadruple that. Plenty
You're
of people out there covering that stuff. Yeah.
Well, because it's a great way to find out about it. It's a beautiful hobby, right? It's a social hobby. It's inherently worth talking about and sharing. And I'm okay with this solitaire movement and all that, but I'm tired in a way of people telling me they can't find an opponent. I'm like, come on, man. Like,
well, if you have a digital option, like with Rally the Troops you were talking about, that's another way because you may, you know, some people are, you know, living in areas where they don't have a lot of gamers around.
yes.
And then you may meet up with somebody that lives in, I don't know, Japan or France or something and say, hey, let's play a game. And you can. You don't have to say, well, when we get together at the same convention in 3 or 4 years, we'll do it. No, you can. Let's do it tonight or tomorrow.
That's what I'm saying. Where there's a will, there's a way. I have sat there and played Rally the Troops games, you know, start to finish, like as if we were talking to each other.
No one wants to play with you, Jeff. Just busted his chops.
Yeah, but it's also asynchronous. Like you can just make a move and then it'll wait for you to come back.
Which is a great thing for what Fango just brought up. It's a timing thing, not a finding. So if it's timing and you want to play on Rally the Troops or whatever, you can do your move and then your opponent can do their move the next day or 2 days later or whatever if your schedules are not, you know, jiving up to where you can get on and play a live game.
Right. But then I say still, like when you're meeting the people on there, like friend them. There's actually a mechanic in Rally the Troops to friend the people. And then there are little tournaments you can play, and you can chat too. So like, make friends. I just love doing that. And
Yeah.
knowing who I'm playing with, and then maybe I'll meet them someday, whether it's random or planned. Um, but if we ever did, boy, we'd sit there and play like 4 games back to back of Julius Caesar or something,
Nice.
and wouldn't even stop to eat.
There you go. Well, that's the thing. So now you said Quebec is on Rally the Troops.
Not quite yet.
Oh, it
Quebec
isn't
is
yet?
going
Okay.
to be added as a module. There's like 20 some games on Rally the Troops,
Mhm.
and about 5 of them are my titles.
Nice.
So there's plenty of choices. It's Julius Caesar, Richard III, Hammer of the Scots, Crusader X, Rommel in the Desert, and soon to be a couple more.
Okay.
I'm supportive of the whole thing, and I'm very grateful. I want to, use every time I get in public to give a thanks to Tor for doing it as a labor of love, and that I'm supportive. I help provide the graphics and things, but he's a genius. I mean, I know how websites work, and what he's doing about like how it all works, and I know what he's really doing. It's a database in the back end, and the state of all the units is just a database entry, and so the code involved in handling what happens is, I kind of understand it, but boy, I applaud it. Is what I'm really trying to say.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's
It,
not an easy project at all.
it,
So,
it really works. So I'm saying the community is out there, whether it's digital or if you don't have one in your neighborhood. I'm saying you might find that your neighbor or some person out there is actually a wargamer, and
true.
they literally don't know it because no one has yet introduced them, but they might be very grateful in the end if you did. And I'm going to also suggest it's kind of a salesman's tactic, right? When you're a salesman and you need to stay motivated, if you're smart, you add up your total results over a given time period,
Mhm.
and then divide it by the number of efforts that were required. Meaning you get an average ticket, sort of an average
Yeah.
skill or whatever.
What's your
And
ROI? Yeah.
yeah, but I use that to keep positive, right? If you're having to make cold calls or something, right?
Mhm.
But you know that your average ticket that took 100 cold calls is actually $1,000. Well, then you know that every call is worth $10,
Mhm.
and you can, even when they hang up on you and say go away, you can say thank you for the $10. So that is a salesman's trick, but it applies if you're evangelizing too, right? If the person isn't receptive, just don't worry about it. Go find another one.
Yeah.
And so I'm on a bit of a crusade to grow the hobby like that, because I really wish for everyone to have the experience of playing like head to head, face to face with a buddy, and hopefully kind of a legendary friendship that lasts for years and years and years.
Well, I think we're gonna have to. Me and Nate are gonna have to play Quebec online at some point
Yeah,
here, and we'll do. I don't know if we'll do a live play necessarily, or we'll do a play and then record it and post it. But
We can do
because
it.
we found that when we do these, that also when we call them Friday night fights when we get around to being able to do them. We do them on Friday nights and we play, and we find that that engagement helps too because we get a lot of people that follow along, watch it, they ask questions about the game, they see the game, then they go and they get the game, and because they see it in action and they see us playing and having a good time and trash talking the whole 9 yards. The audience trash talks. It's great.
yeah.
It's just a
Well,
good time.
I played a legendary game of Caesar against my co-designer Justin Thompson that was
Mhm.
through the Brown Troops, and it was recorded, and we talked and stuff. That was a
Nice.
little while ago. I think now with all the right tech, you could really do a great job of that.
Mhm.
But one of the other neato features in Rally the Troops is every game is archived forever, and you
Yeah.
can go and watch them. You can
Oh, neat.
replay them move by move, like click, move, or you can put it on play, and it will just play.
Hmm.
And I know you guys have played Civilization. You can, at the end of a Civ game, you can
Yep.
replay the whole thing. It's
Yeah.
like that. It's
Wow.
like that. And
That's pretty cool.
you can also decide if you want to see one side or the other side or neither side. And that's also true while the game is live. You can join it and spectate, in which case you can see neither side. But you can see the pieces, and move. So there's a community aspect to it there from watching the games, as you said, would be great for a Friday night thing. And if you don't want to wait for Quebec, at least go get on there and maybe do Julius Caesar or Hammer of Scots or something. It walks you through the rules. You can't break the rules. If you have the document to read beside you, that's going to help. But and by the way, I'm not a stickler that you need to own the game. I don't consider it to be the most important thing. In the end, of course, I want to sell games. It keeps me in business. And you guys, when you buy games, are supporting a family business, 2 generations. Sure. It's all really good stuff. But I have also learned that what's really important is playtime. I call it virtual playtime. Tabletime doesn't matter. If people are playing these games, then they're talking about them, then they're having fun, then they're sharing, then they're growing. And we do pretty good about people become block gamers, and then they kind of want them all.
Well, I've seen it at my local store. I've got my favorite local game store, and he sells war games. And I sponsor a store on my videos. And I like going in there and seeing the stuff, and oh yeah, I got a video up on that one, or I got a video up on that one. And if I remember right, I believe I saw Quebec, a couple of copies up there, so he was pushing it up. Yeah. I might be wrong, but I believe I did see it there.
Well, I am supportive of that, so if it's not, then next time you're in there, we'll
only go buy some.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very supportive of all levels of the industry. We are kind of mostly direct to consumer, but I'm happy, especially overseas too. Hey, look, this little story. That's a pretty good little story because Shenandoah is a neat little game. It's actually Quebec-like. It's super light. It's got 50 blocks, and the tension and the decisions from supply lines and limited movement and all that work really, really well. The asymmetry between the Union and the Confederates. Neat game. So that's nice to hear.
Just as an FYI, my 4-year-old loves your blocks. When I first opened up Alliance and there's just a bag full of colorful blocks, she went nuts. She was sitting there all happy as she could be to start stacking them on the table and start organizing them. So of course I had to let her play for a little bit, but
for sure.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, I built castles, right? Like some people had Lego, I had blocks. I could build a whole thing, right? Because we had lots of blocks.
Oh, she was a little upset I wouldn't let her sticker them with me. I got to make sure these are centered, baby girl.
It's hard, yeah. Well,
the funny thing is, this is something you could probably do a video on. You could, when it comes to, that's one complaint that people always say with blocks, and I've never felt that way about, and I've had some block games before. Never had any issues stickering blocks, but people go, oh my God, it's so difficult. I'm like, it's really not. You just pull off like 5 to 10, 15, and I literally put them on my fingers. And then I just grab a block and I just sticker, boom.
Well, it's just,
I just have like a little production line going. I'm done in like, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes.
At most, yeah. And some of the games you can get done in 5.
Yeah. Depending on how many blocks, yeah.
Right.
Oh, and I agree. You guys including the extra block is good too. All your games thus far that I've had, you've had an extra block included, just in case, and that is appreciated.
And the key is to save every block from every game because you never know when you may need one at another point in time.
Exactly,
you might lose one or whatever. So,
save them all, just in case. Yeah, guys. Well, this has been really fun. Like you can probably tell, once I get talking, I can talk.
Well, you love your games. That's why I said it shows the passion you have for your games, which I think is a great reflection of Columbia Games. So, like I said before, everybody, if you're interested in any of these games, go over to ColumbiaGames.com, check them out. And the only one I saw that I noticed that is coming out on Kickstarter sometime is Napoleon. You said that one's out of stock right now on the website. So
yeah, and that's the classic from 1974. Going to get its own kind of 50th anniversary edition.
Nice.
This year.
Nice.
It already got a pretty big upgrade the last time we did it, so I'm not out there to sell it again to the same people. Really, it's just that we just need to bring it back into print, and it will be nice. The quality of the components will be in parallel to what Nate saw in the Quebec and the Alliance. That's kind of the new standard, and we've always had pretty good looking stuff. The blocks have always been attractive and stuff, but people were less in love with the style of boxes we had that were generic with a slip cover. And I still like them, but we're moving with the times.
So one final question from Bob Fanoof. What is the best blocks game? Any publisher? He says he knows that you have a favorite.
Oh, well, I kind of do get a little. I go in streaks, right? Like I'm really into Richard III right now. I'm for a long time I was really, really, really into Julius Caesar. Hammer of the Scots. I'd sit down and play that with anybody, anytime, anywhere. The Big Boy East Front. Those four get the most attention in my mind from me, and I would probably define them as, if I had to pick one, I really had to pick just one, I would probably say Julius Caesar. I like Rome. I mean, I think the most important thing for people is to look for a period that is, kind of what you want. Right?
Sure.
I mean, that's a very big part of this, is why we do this. It doesn't necessarily be a period that you already know a lot about, but just that you're interested in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to find out, hopefully, a whole bunch more, and there could be some whole tangents and rabbit holes you go down reading this or that because of the experience, which is what, again, I crave that.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, it's good to hear, and I agree. I'm kind of like that too, streaky when it comes to games. It's one of the reasons why I really don't do top fives, top tens, because they change and they're not always the same. And I kind of feel weird saying, "Oh, these are my top 5 war games." It's not going to be that way in 6 months or a year, more than likely. So
that's why you do top 5 of the year.
Yeah,
top 5 of this year.
Yeah.
But then is that the top 5 that came out this year, or the top 5 you played this year?
Exactly. I always do the ones I play. I can't review it if I haven't played it. So it's like, my top 5 games that I played this year. And I'll do one of those every January.
Good idea.
Well, that's a good thing, and hopefully some of the block games will make the cut here down the road.
There you go.
Well, again, I'm starting to fidget in my seat with the need to go to the little boy's room.
Sure. No. We're gonna finish up this stream here. Anyway, I was just wrapping up the last question I wanted to get over to you from Bob.
And I welcome some more. Please kind of reach out to me. I'm like a real person here. And very happy to meet all of you guys who are gamers. Write emails and reach me on social and stuff. And let's be friends.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, Grant. And thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you, the audience, for joining us as well. We will catch you on the next Whiskey Charlie. Have a great night, everyone.